folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome to the Best of Publishers series. Today we're taking a look at Mayfair Games. Now, Mayfair Games is a very long, in the business when it comes to published games, Mayfair has been around for quite a while. And in fact, I'm going to split Mayfair's into two lists. I'm going to do their top 10 list, but just recently Mayfair acquired Lookout Games. And Lookout Games are so potent and such a big deal that I'm going to be doing the Lookout Games as their own list. Now, Mayfair is one of the first companies, if not the first, to bring German games over to America. And they've partnered with Phalanx Games, and I mentioned Lookout already, and DV Giacchi from Italy, and probably their biggest partner over the years has been Cosmos. Now, Cosmos is essentially publishing on their own and bringing their own games in. But the biggest thing from Mayfair is probably Catan, right? Now, in 2016, they sold the rights to Catan to Asmodee. So Asmodee has Catan now. But for the longest time, that was their mainstay. If you have gone to Origins or Gen Con in the past, you will see that Mayfair has had a huge presence there. They were big on really advertising themselves. And I believe it was 1995, Jay Tummelson came on board at Mayfair Games, and he was only there for a few years, but he was certainly instrumental in helping them say, hey, let's go to Europe, let's find these games, let's bring them back, and let's get them reprinted. And then he went off and started his own company, Rio Grande, which will have its own list. But Mayfair is not just reprinting other games. They have produced their own games. Recently, they have their own little line of games, but they're also well known as time has gone by for their train games. They've done the Cran Rail system, where you were drawing on a crayon on different maps or a marker, whatever you want to use. That they have also had the 18XX series, which has been produced by many different companies, but they're well known for it. Some games that are not on my list of my 10 favorite games from them would include like 1830, Railways and Robber Barons. That's a very popular game at Board Game Geek. Or Steam, which was the reworking of Age of Steam by Martin Wallace. Another very popular game that they produced, aren't doing it now, it's moved over to Z-Man Games underneath Asmodee, which was Wind Rider. It's very confusing. But Tigers and Euphrates from Reiner Knizia, that was a game that they had and really pushed for a while. London, Modern Art, Automobile, Lords of Vegas. There are many games that they were very well known for. But here are my 10 favorite non-Lookout Mayfair games. Number 10 is, well, Catan. And it's really important to look at Catan, which was originally called Settlers of Catan. It came out in 1995, 22 years ago. That is still an amazing how this game, along with Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons, changed the face of gaming. And Catan is probably best for bringing people into gaming. Sure, it's kind of cool to hate on Catan now, but Catan has had spin-offs, it's had expansions, it's still being reprinted. It's on the iOS, has certainly helped a resurgence of that, or on Android devices and things. But Catan, that whole idea of rolling a dice, everyone watches the number rolled, you get resources, and then trading those resources, bringing from jokes to showing up in popular culture, Catan has really made a difference in gaming society. But I also enjoy it. Now, I'm not a huge fan of it for 5 to 6. I think 4 is kind of the sweet spot for Catan. But I really like all the expansions. Fisherman is still probably my favorite, but there's Seafarers. Some people really like Cities and Knights. They've added Traders and Barbarians. There are many different expansions, like I said, and spin-offs. And many of those are not even on the list, but it certainly made Klaus Teuber a household name in Germany and was very instrumental in bringing over the Euro games to America. Number 9 is Maharaja. Now, this is a game that you probably haven't heard of, but it's just one that, for me, I really enjoyed because it wasn't about getting victory points. It was about finishing, building these little temples around it. So you were moving. You had to be kind of a very efficient in how you moved around this board and built things. This is one that is forgotten to some degree today, but when I first played, I was like, wow, it just felt different. It felt unique. It felt deep. So my number 9, Maharaja. Number 8 is The Downfall of Pompeii. Now, Pompeii is a game that's really kind of a horrific theme, right? It's about the volcano bursting, and and people dying in it. But it's very abstracted out, right? And I've never seen anyone like really complain about it. I guess it's happened so far in the past that it's not a big deal. But in this game, the volcano's erupting. You are putting the first half of the game, you are filling the city with your citizens. And then the second half, you are getting your citizens out there and trying to control the flow of lava. So it takes your opponent's little dudes out and you throw them in a volcano. Sounds horrific, but it is great family fun. Really. Downfall of Pompeii. Number 7 is Rivals of Catan, or this was the Catan card game or what have you. This is basically 2-player Settlers of Catan, and it worked. The Catan card game, when it first came out, I was like, yeah, this is not okay. And I tried it, and I was just amazed at how good it was. I actually, like you can see, I like it better than Catan, and I didn't think a game where you would trade back and forth. There is a pile of expansions for this game, so it can feel different. You can add in magic if you want to. You can add in some more combat type things back and forth, but it's very intriguing, and I think it really holds up well. Number 6 is Pillars of the Earth. You hear us talk about this game very often. This is one of their collaborations with Cosmos, and we might not see this one again because of the licensing of it, but it really works well as you are building this cathedral. It's one of the most beautiful games that's ever been made. As a side note, Mayfair, unfortunately, as the years have gone by, has not really upped their quality standards. Their quality is still just a smidge over what it was, 20 years ago. And I find that an unfortunate thing about Mayfair, and I worry about the future of Mayfair if they continue to put out games that just are a lower quality than the rest of the market. But this actual production, Pillars of the Earth, and then the follow-up World Without End, with Cosmos did not have that problem with quality, and so this Pillars of the Earth was just a gorgeous thing to look at. It brought the theme of the book to life, but even if you've never read the book or anything, you could sit there and you're collecting people and resources to build parts of this cathedral that's taking place in front of you. A really neat, excellent game. Maybe someday it will be rethemed and reprinted. So that was number 6. Number 5 is Starfarers of Catan. You say, Vasel, how much Catan do you have on this list? Well, it is the mainstay of Mayfair, or it was for a long time. And Starfarers of Catan was a game in which it was Settlers of Catan in space. But you had these big retro spaceships, which were really neat. They had these little balls in the bottom that would have random events. You actually added guns to them and engines to them. You would come across cards where you would meet pirates and you would make stories. It was a smidge too long, but it was just a gorgeous production. I mean, amazingly cool, but also a lot of fun because it took Settlers of Catan and that whole idea of rolling dice and seeing what you get, but added some exploration and go out and find planets that were useful to you. Number 4 is Lords of Vegas. I mentioned this one already. This one came out. It sounded interesting. It was about building casinos in Vegas, and it has dice in it. Like, ooh, wow, what are these dice used for? Well, sometimes you roll them, but for the most part, they were used to control different casinos, and there was hostile takeovers. It can be kind of a mean game, but it almost took some elements from Acquire, as different casinos would show up on the board, different casinos would score, and you're trying to control them, and hopefully, have them in the best locations. It's really an excellently done game. A mini expansion up for it, kind of also added a 3D element to it. Highly recommend it. Lords of Vegas. Number 3 is Starship Catan. Yes, this is the last Catan on this list. But Starship Catan was the 2-player version of Starfarers of Catan, which was the space version of Settlers of Catan. Now, Starfarers of Catan is actually very different than Rivals of Catan, which is the Settlers of Catan 2-player game. Starship Catan is a 2-player game in which you each have your spaceship and you are exploring. There's piles of cards middle of the table, and you will explore in those piles, trying to find the right planets so that you can trade resources and also avoid pirates. So there's a bit of memory element into it as you went into each pile, but also had a great sense of exploration. It was redone as a pirate game a few years ago. I believe Winds of Plunder from Z-Man game. But the 2-player version here is still my favorite, still in my collection, Starship Catan. Number 2, which the rights for this game went to Rio Grande at some point, but they were originally with Mayfair, and that is Manhattan. This is a Spiel des Jahres winner, a 3D building towers game, which is still a classic game. As you sit there and you build a tower and someone else puts it on top of your tower, and you're trying to have the most towers in different areas. You also want to have the highest tower on the board, and it's this constant back and forth taking towers, but it has a very 3D cool visual effect, and yet very, very simple gameplay. Very highly recommend it. That is Manhattan. Number 1 for me is another game from Klaus Teuber, who did all the Catan stuff, but this one is not Catan. This one is Domain. Originally, he did a game called Lowenherz, which Domain is the reworking of Lowenherz, and I like Domain better, although there's certainly some controversy there amongst people some people like one better than the other. But Domain is a game in which you are basically building 4 domains on the board, and you're building boundaries around them, trying to get the biggest one. Other people are trying to cut your boundaries off to make theirs bigger. Once the boundaries are set, then you're like trying to eat into each other's domain, and it's all through a very simple pay to play a card or discard a card and get the money for that card so you can pay to play other cards. Very simple, great 4-player game. Still my collection, wonderful game. So those are my 10 favorite games from Mayfair. Like I said, I worry a little bit about Mayfair now that they've sold off Catan. They've put all their eggs in one basket, essentially, which is Lookout Games, which is my next list that I'm going to do. And there's some really fantastic Lookout games, so we'll see where the future of Mayfair is. Their own stuff itself is usually a cut below everyone else when you look at things that Asmodee and Kumani are not, and, you know, Renegade Games and other games that are doing similar style games. Mayfair seems to be a cut below those, but that could change. We'll see where Mayfair is in a few years, but there's no denying the impact they've had on the board gaming industry, and I'm glad that they did that. One of the biggest games that they did, and I didn't put it on my list because the reprint to me far exceeded it, but my favorite game is Cosmic Encounter. And Mayfair did a version of Cosmic Encounter that for a few years was the version I played. You know, they did Cosmic Encounter, they did more Cosmic Encounter. They went the craziest that Cosmic Encounter has ever been. The Fantasy Flight version has completely obliterated that one for me. So that's when I do Fantasy Flight, kind of a spoiler there. But I have to give them credit for keeping this game in print. The production value of their Cosmic Encounter was not good at all, but it's still an amazing game, and I'm glad they did it. So that's Mayfair. Tune in next time, and we'll be taking a look at Lookout Games.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.